Hi there, welcome to my channel. I'm Memo. This is Houseplanty Goodness, a channel where I talk about my passion, which is houseplants and tropical houseplants more specifically, and how I grow them within my environment, and certain tips and tricks that I found work really well for me and hopefully could help you in your own houseplant journey. Now, as a new YouTube creator, it does really help if I get some engagement with you guys. So if you do like this type of content, if you like this video, drop a like down below. If you want to see more of these types of videos, I try to post every 2 to 3 days a week, essentially. So do subscribe down below as well, and you'll get notified as soon as I bring out some new videos. So let's dive into this, shall we? So a lot of people constantly asking me, what can I do to make my plants bushier or bigger, essentially? Because a lot of people these days, and it is quite tricky, especially with some of these rarer plants, more expensive, harder to find plants, house plants, is that you might only ever get a single stem cutting. It might just be a cutting, it might be 1 or 2 leaf cutting, so you will only ever have one stem. And after a while, after it starts growing, it can look a bit odd, and you might not like the look of just that singular stem going up. So what you need to do, obviously, is trim back the plant to a level that you want. And I've got an example here. This is a Philodendron hastatum. This is a silver sword philodendron, which, interesting point on this, I'm not entirely sure, but I remember reading somewhere that it's actually one of the plants that, even though it's been grown for a while now in cultivation in terms of houseplants, in nature, however, it is slowly creeping towards endangered. So definitely a plant that make sure that you're sourcing from a reputable plant shop or garden centers to make sure that people aren't poaching these plants from the nature. But also a really cool plant to have in your collection, because if these do go extinct in nature, probably the last specimens that we'll have will be what's left in people's own collections. So something to bear in mind. But this is a plant that I got, and I don't know whether or not you might be able to see. I've also got a trusty chopstick to show you things a bit closer, and I'll bring it closer to the camera. Hopefully it will focus. You can see that was the original cutting there, and you can see that's where it was cut. This is one of the original leaves here, and you can see at the very top there, I took a huge cut because this plant was nearly 3 times the size. The rest of it that I've cut off, I'm now propagating, and it's growing quite happily, and I'll come back to propagation in another video. But you can now see 1, 2, 3 growth points that have happened on this plant. And let's talk about that, because there is a scientific explanation as to why it's happening. So on the main stem of a plant, so the main stem that it will be growing from, if you cut that off, essentially you're disrupting what is called apical dominance. So apical dominance is the fact that the main stem of the plant will be the one that will be growing the most and growing upwards, and it won't be putting as much energy into side shoots or any side growth. Leaves are not the side growth. Leaves are actually attached to a petiole that then attaches to the stem, which is the middle part. A lot of people mistakenly call this part of houseplant the stem. It's not. It's a petiole that attaches to the leaf that then attaches to the stem. But what you do is, when you cut this main growth stem, is you interrupt that apical dominance, and then what then happens is it sends signal down further into the plant at the other nodes of the plant. So you can see here, these are nodes, to then push out growth from that point so that it can actually get a new apical dominant location. So I'm hazarding a guess here. It's not always as simple as which one's growing the fastest or first, but I would assume that this growth point here will be the new point of apical dominance, and it will then become the new stem. The same way, and this is why I showed you before, the same way that this was the original apical dominant stem before the cut was taken to propagate, and then you can see the side stem that happened after that. This then became the apical dominant stem. So that's a bit more about how you get your plant to bush up. So there's a few things that you're doing whilst you're chopping off that main stem. One, you're making the plant a bit more manageable, because sometimes they become very tall and very lanky, so you can bring it down into more compact size. You then disrupt the apical dominance, which then signals the plant to essentially push out more growth from side shoots, which again would mean that if all 3 of these side shoots, and that's another point, if all three of these side shoots grow, it will become much bushier. The point that I'm trying to make is that a lot of the times in household conditions within most people's collections, you won't always get all 3 or even 4 of the side growth points growing at the same time, because it takes a lot of energy from the plant to be able to push out that new growth. So something to bear in mind, touching on the point that it needs a lot more energy, it needs a lot more nutrients to push out that side growth. So just make sure that even in the winter time, if you're not fertilizing, which I don't fully agree with that, you should still probably be fertilizing weekly as long as the plant is growing. Then just remember to fertilize this plant when you've done something like this to it, because it will help those new growth areas grow essentially. Especially with anybody, if anybody's got a silver sword, at least in my care, and I think from what I've seen online, they are very, very slow growers. So I took this cut probably over a month and a half ago, and I'm only just now starting to get these side shoots. With other plants, for instance, my variegated burley marks philodendron, that one, as soon as you cut it, pretty much within a day or two, you've got another growth point coming out. So it depends on how the plant will grow. But yeah, apical dominance is very important because it will help you bush out your plant by having those side shoots happening. And obviously if you've propagated the other sections that you've cut off from the plant, you've then got other plantlets that you could potentially, some of them you could repot into the same pot and get a much bushier looking plant. So that is a simple and easy way of just making sure that you get a much fuller looking plant, and you'll have more than one growth point. If you see some of these plants that you might be buying from plant stores or garden centres and you see they're really, really bushy, usually the reason why they're really, really bushy is because it's not just the one stem, it might be 3 or 4 stems within the same pot. So yeah, that's a bit more on apical dominance and how to make your plants look fuller. If you've got any questions, any comments, drop them in the comments down below. I'd love to have that conversation with you. And yeah, in the meantime, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I hope you've enjoyed, and hopefully I shall see you here soon. Thanks. Bye.